Hello and welcome to Crime Scene X. Today we're going to explore 3 true and terrifying stories from the world of theme parks. If you find yourself intrigued or chilled by these tales, please show your support with a like, drop a comment with your thoughts below, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for your daily dose of spine-tingling stories. Now, make sure you're settled in comfortably as we take a ride through the darker side of thrills and chills. Enjoy the video. I remember laughing as I entered the theme park, the screams from the roller coasters and the scent of cotton candy in the air. It was supposed to be a day of carefree fun. As evening approached, the crowds thinned out, and the cheerful daylight gave way to an unsettling twilight, casting long shadows across the walkways. I was alone, having split from my group to grab a quick snack. That's when I first noticed him, a gaunt man in a tattered park uniform, watching me from across the path. His gaze was intense, unblinking. I thought it was odd, but shook off the feeling and moved on. I decided to go on the park's famous House of Mirrors before meeting my friends for the fireworks. Inside the maze of reflections, I lost my bearings quickly, the echoes of my footsteps the only sound. I turned a corner and gasped. The man from before was behind me, reflected 100 times in the mirrors around us. I couldn't tell which way he was, but his eyes never left mine in the dizzying array of images. Panic gripped me. I ran, my heart pounding, the sound of his following footsteps merging with my own. I pushed through the mirrored corridors, and finally I burst out into the open air, gasping for breath. I looked around frantically, but he was gone. Trying to calm my nerves, I told myself it was just a park employee playing a prank. I found my friends, and we watched the fireworks, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. After the show, as we headed to the exit, I realized I'd left my bag in the House of Mirrors. I told my friends I'd catch up and hurried back. The park was closing, the once lively paths now deserted and silent. The House of Mirrors was eerie in the darkness, the laughter and chatter replaced by a suffocating silence. I found my bag easily, but as I turned to leave, I heard it, the soft tap of a footstep. My breath caught in my throat as I saw him, the same disheveled employee, standing at the only exit. His face was pale, eyes hollow, and a sickening grin spread across his face. There was no playful glint in his eyes, no sign that this was just a joke. I backed away, my mind racing, when I realized that the exit wasn't the only way out. I remembered the emergency exit I'd seen earlier, hidden behind a false mirror. I feigned a dash toward the main exit, then darted to the emergency door. I slammed it shut behind me, my heart racing. Outside, I ran until I found a security guard and told him everything. When we returned to the House of Mirrors, it was empty. No sign of the strange man anywhere. The guard just shook his head, muttering about how they hadn't had an employee match that description in years. I never found out who he was or what he wanted. The park officials found no evidence, and my friends think it was just a scare. But every time I pass a reflective surface, I can't help but search for that haunting face, and I wonder if my escape was just a cruel part of his game. I had always enjoyed the thrill of theme parks, but my most recent visit to one left me with a deep-rooted sense of dread that lingered long after I had left. It was a dull, overcast day, and I was meandering through the park alone after my friends had called off at the last minute. I didn't mind. The gray skies meant shorter lines, and I could enjoy the rides without the usual wait. The first few hours were uneventful, filled with the mechanical roars of rides and the sugary taste of funnel cakes. But as the day wore on, the sky grew darker, and a misty rain began to fall, dampening the crowds until it felt like I had the park to myself. I found myself drawn to an old, isolated section of the park that seemed almost abandoned. The rides were dated, the paint peeling, and there was a stillness in the air that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. I figured it was just the weather playing tricks on me, so I shrugged it off and approached a carousel that creaked and clunked as it spun. The ride attendant was an older man, his face etched with deep lines, and his eyes seemed to follow me as I chose a horse and mounted. There was a flicker of something in his gaze that I couldn't place, but it unsettled me. The music started, a slow, distorted tune that sounded like it was being played on a broken instrument, and as the ride picked up speed, I felt a growing sense of unease. When the ride ended, the attendant was staring at me with an intensity that made my stomach churn. I thanked him quickly and moved away, trying to shake the feeling of his eyes boring into me. I decided to head to the park's main attraction, a towering roller coaster that promised to chase away the lingering discomfort. The queue was deserted, and I found myself alone in the station with another attendant who strapped me in silently, his movements methodical and precise. The coaster lurched forward, and as I ascended the first incline, the park's lights flickered below, casting shifting shadows across the landscape. I tried to enjoy the ride, but a growing sense of isolation crept over me as I realized there was no one else on the coaster, no screams of excitement or laughter, just the sound of the rain and the wind. The coaster dived and twisted, and as I clung to the safety bar, I saw something that sent a jolt of fear through me. At every turn and loop, I glimpsed the carousel attendant. He was standing motionless, watching from different vantage points, always facing me, his expression unreadable in the dim light. By the time the ride came to a shuddering stop, I was breathless, not from the thrill but from cold, gripping fear. I stumbled off the ride, looking around frantically, but the man was nowhere to be seen. The park was eerily quiet, the laughter and chatter replaced by the sound of my own footsteps as I hurried towards the exit. I glanced back one last time to see the carousel spinning slowly in the distance, its lights flickering as if sending a Morse code of warning. I didn't stop running until I reached the safety of my car. The drive home was a blur, my mind replaying the day's events. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, of being alone in a place that should have been filled with joy. The allure of the theme park had always been a mix of nostalgia and adrenaline for me, but that summer night, the atmosphere was different, charged with a grim sort of electricity that I couldn't place. The park was running its seasonal nocturnal hours, a gimmick to draw in the thrill-seekers and night owls. I remember walking through the gates, feeling the subtle shift from the warm evening air to the coolness of the park, artificially lit and buzzing with energy. I gravitated toward an old roller coaster, a relic from the park's early days. It was a wooden behemoth that rattled and shook with age. The click-clack of the cars climbing the track echoed through the night. There was something about its time-worn presence that felt both inviting and unsettling. The queue was sparse, and the ride operator was a young guy, probably in his early 20s, with a detached demeanor. He didn't make eye contact as he took our tickets, his face partially obscured by the hood of his park-issued sweatshirt. As my car ascended, the park's noises became a distant hum. At the peak, the city's skyline was a distant, shimmering backdrop. But as the coaster crested the top and barreled down the first drop, the thrill was undercut by a sudden jarring halt that whipped my head forward. We were suspended at an awkward angle, the structure groaning beneath us. The operator's voice crackled through the intercom, instructing us to stay seated. I could barely make out his figure below, pacing, occasionally glancing up. His movements seemed off, too quick, jerky, like he was agitated or nervous. Minutes stretched on, and the initial annoyance from the other riders turned into nervous jokes and then to a tense silence. That's when I heard it, a soft scraping sound, like metal on metal. Peering over the side of the car, I saw a shadow moving up the structure. It wasn't the operator, but someone else, climbing with purposeful, unsettling speed. I squinted against the dim light and realized with a start that it was one of the costumed characters from the park, a mascot, still in full, bulky attire. The absurdity of the situation dissolved quickly when I saw the object in his hand, a large wrench or tool of some sort, glinting dully. He reached our car and paused, his character's cheerful mask grotesquely out of place. He tapped the wrench against the car, a slow, deliberate rhythm that sent chills down my spine. He didn't speak. He just stood there, tapping, staring through the eye holes of the mask. Then, as suddenly as he had appeared, he descended, the tapping fading with each rung he descended. When the ride finally lurched back into motion, depositing us back at the platform, the night had turned cold, and the festive lights seemed harsh, glaring. I stumbled off the ride, my legs weak. I looked around for the mascot or the operator, but both were gone. The other riders dispersed quickly, their laughter and chatter from before now silenced. When I reported the incident, the staff were baffled. No maintenance was scheduled, and no one should have been climbing the coaster. They said the mascots were accounted for, none missing. I left the park immediately, the sounds of revelry behind me now seeming hollow. The image of the mascot's masked face and the sound of the wrench against the coaster car stayed with me, turning what should have been a night of fun into a memory tinged with an inexplicable dread. The unanswered questions of who it was and why they climbed left me with a haunting suspicion that there was more lurking beneath the park's surface than just the thrill of the rides. Thanks for watching. If you haven't already, please like the video, comment what you thought, and subscribe for daily uploads.